Hi, I'm Rob, and welcome back to Series 4 of the Uncut Network. Had a month off, needed it, and we rotate back and forth between directors, actors, and super specific genres. We cover everything from Satanic Panic to Lauren Bacall to Toshiaki Toyoda, touching on everything from exploitation to names more people should know about, and things your parents won't endlessly question you for liking, plus everything in between. To cover all of this and more for the first episode of this new series, I've been joined by Kat. Hello there.
Hello.
And first time on the podcast proper, but been on the podcast the Fright Fest specials before, Becci. Hello there.
Hiya, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. How are you both doing? I know one of you was at a late night
no, we were both
press
there.
screen. Oh, we both were.
Yeah.
So how are you after that? Because that's the Terrifier 3 premiere, which was a big event with sick bags and everything.
Yeah, very tired, running on exhilaration from the film still.
I just worry about my seatmate. I just worry about how he is because his reactions to everything in that film were a lot. He was shouting, he was wincing. Anytime a body part was attacked on screen, he was like hugging that body part on himself. I was sat on the front row with the railings in front, and at one point he leant forward and was holding onto the railings with his head looking at the floor screaming. So yeah, I bailed about 50 minutes from the end because I was hosting the Q&A and I wanted to make sure that I was in the right place. And I know that there was another really gnarly scene coming up after that, so I just worry that he was okay. I mean, another reason I left early was because I thought he would vomit on me, and I didn't.
Yeah, you kind of answered my question there. Yeah, you answered my question because I thought it was a prop bag. I thought, is it a prop bag? Has anybody used it? I wonder. And then you kind of answered me. Probably, yeah. Probably somebody there.
Apparently there was 11 walkouts and a vomiter, apparently, like Signature posted this morning. I mean, they're definitely like proper sick bags. They could have used it, so maybe it did get put to use.
I went out, I was talking to security, and yeah, they said they'd had quite a few people coming out being quite queasy and quite nauseous, and they had first aid trained staff on hand because there's basically a security guard sat outside the screen directing anybody that came out to a first aider. Or where the bathrooms were if that's what people needed. So yeah, it was quite intense.
Is it that graphic to warrant that?
You'll have to go and see it on October 11th.
Yeah, but I mean, obviously everybody's tolerances are different. Everyone's tolerances are different, and the thing at a press screening is you will have, people like myself and Becci that have seen all sorts of things, and I've also birthed children. I mean, once you've birthed a child, there isn't nothing you can see on screen that's gonna phase you. But then there'll also be the people who, this is kind of like their first horror screening.
Oh wow, yeah.
Or they're just used to like the Blumhouse jump scares. Putting them in front of any of the Terrifier films is going to cause issues, especially if they've been, having quite a lot of drink or they've eaten quite a heavy meal, and then the excitement of being in the screen with like the cast and crew present. There's lots of sort of factors that can cause it, but yeah, it does get pretty good because it's not a studio film, so they don't have that big boss going, oh no, we can't show that. Oh no, we can't show that. They've just got like independent sickos going, yes, more.
And with more money this time as well. So they've not got that studio behind them, but they have got that nice big budget to play with. I think it definitely shows.
Don't know if I'm looking forward to it because I've not seen any of the others, but it's certainly a big event for horror, isn't it? These movies that become the big thing. Yeah. So tonight, very conscious, gonna drill it into my head so I don't say it wrong. Kyle Gallner. There we go. So no mistakes made there. we can move forward. So there's a loaded question here. So I'm gonna start with Becci, because we've got the advocate, I think we call it, present tonight. But Becci, where was your first sort of your first experience of watching a Kyle Gallner movie where you're aware that this is a guy to pay attention to?
So the first that I think I was like really taken with him as an actor was Jennifer's Body. But technically the first film I'd seen him in was Haunting in Connecticut. But at the time it was like I didn't really know who he was. I watched it, didn't really pay too much attention the first time around when I watched it. I wasn't really taken with it. But then when I saw Jennifer's Body, it was like lives were changed. Loved this film, loved everything it was about, loved everything in it, and loved Kyle's character because I was like that weird little like emo kid at school. So to see that on screen, definitely someone I'd have been obsessed with in school. I was like, yes, love this. So that was the first time that I'd seen him and really wanted to see more that he did. And then I think the next after that was Nightmare on Elm Street.
He's been in a lot. Yeah. He's one of those actors where you think, he was in that? No.
Yeah, absolutely. There's so much more that I realised that I had actually seen beforehand that he was in, but I'd not really realised. And I think it's a testament to the sort of roles he does as well, that he really can sort of chameleon into it so that he is the character, not the actor necessarily.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the one that was for me where I was like, he's in that? No way is he in that. Was Red State, which feels like an eternity ago.
Yeah.
But he's in that, apparently. I'm still one of the teenage lads that sort of kicks everything.
The main teenage lad.
Oh, wow. Okay. I don't want to watch it again because it's a terrible movie, but interesting to have that sort of discovery, I think. And leading to Kat, who, yeah, Kyle Gallner.
Yeah, so my first thing with Kyle Gallner was when he was a guest star in an episode of Smallville. I still remember I was at university and Smallville was on a Tuesday night and I didn't have Sky, so I couldn't watch it. And I'd go around to my friend's house and we would watch Smallville. And I still remember his episode run because he played Bart Allen, aka The Flash. Although I don't think they called him Flash in Smallville. He was called like Speed or something silly. And it just has such a cheesy ending where Clark and Bart are running really fast together, but it's in slow motion and they're just sort of like looking out over each other and giving each other big cheesy grins. So that was my first experience with Kyle. And then it would have been Veronica Mars. So it was more sort of his TV work. And in Veronica Mars, he plays a horrible character who for the first season is presented as a lovely character. So that old bait and switch was gutting. But he's just always been one of those actors that I will watch whatever he's in, even if he's only a small part in it, because he always picks interesting projects. I was a big fan of the Beautiful Creatures book series, and he is briefly in that. So I remember him from that. And then, yeah, Jennifer's Body and Nightmare on Elm Street. And yeah, just kind of everything from there. He's in American Sniper. He's in all sorts. But Smallville is where it all began.
Jennifer's Body, is that... I'm misremembering which one that is, because there was a movie around that time with that lead star that kind of got lost in the studio system a little bit and got a bit chewed up, and it was years before anybody really seen it. Am I thinking of the same movie, or am I just sort of cannibalising memories and mushing it together?
With, it's Megan Fox and Amanda Seyfried. When Megan Fox is sort of in a ritual with a band and they accidentally, like, they're meant to kill a virgin, but she's not a virgin, so she becomes a succubus and eats boys. And Kyle Gallner's, unfortunately, Kyle Gallner, I'm going to start doing it as well. Kyle Gallner is one of those boys.
His surname's all in caps. It's the only way you can do it. Yes. So there's 3 movies that we're going to be doing. His first, that's already been mentioned, 2009's Haunting of Connecticut. 2020's, which is a shame that it was 2020. That would have been great in a sort of, well, a year when the world wasn't ending, but that's Dinner in America. And from 2023, The Passenger.
You were dreaming and breathing heavy. Which, of course, can either mean it was a very bad dream or a very good one.
Well, I've had better. I don't know. It's just like sometimes lately it's been tough.
What?
I don't know, like, do you ever, like, see things, like, hear things, that just, they can't be there?
You don't ever want to tell them you can see things. It's okay. They're not going to understand. I mean, I remember when my wife was dying that whole last day, I sat there praying, crying, and she never once looked up at me. She just looked all around her. And all the others in the room. But we were alone. That's what I thought. See, she was where we are. In the valley of the shadow of death. Hey, you know what to do when you find yourself in the valley? Fear no evil.
So, starting with 2009's The Haunting of Connecticut, I think I'll field the synopsis for this, because it's a fairly straightforward one-ish. It's just a lot of things happening, I guess. But Kyle Gallner is, I don't know how old he'd be at this point. He's a teenager. He's very young. But he has cancer. He's going to hospital for chemo. He's offered this new sort of treatment, this new idea of not chemo, but something to help him get better. And as that is happening, his family's moving into this new house, which just so happens to have been long ago a undertaker's building, really. All sorts of things went on there. And over the course of the movie, it's almost like his dreams and his subconsciousness becomes infected about what all the things that are being going on in his house, and sort of unfolds from there, really. I mean, there's more to it, but in essence, that's kind of it. So, Becci, Connecticut, what were your feelings on that one?
I remember the first time I watched it, it didn't really grab me that much, but I feel like it was because I watched a lot of very similar films around the same sort of time, and it was just sort of, everything sort of moulded into one. But I remember watching it maybe about 10 years later, something like that, and it really struck me, especially for being like Kyle's first like breakout feature role. It's quite a complex role to take on, playing like a teenager who's diagnosed with cancer, going through cancer treatment. Then obviously as things start getting stranger in the film, experiencing the visions they do, experiencing that like family unit deterioration and that sort of almost guilt they experience from what they're putting their family through, the big move to their hospital treatments. I mean, there is a lot to that role for not a new actor, but a new actor to the big screen at least. They've mostly done TV roles and this is going into film roles. And it really struck me like, that is a lot for one person to take on. And yes, it's like the best performance in it, but it's also surrounded by so many other fantastic performances in it that work so well together as a collective unit. And I feel like The Haunting in Connecticut really didn't get as much appreciation as it should have. Yeah, it had a lot of sort of very similar horror tropes to other films around at the time, but to me, looking back to it now, it feels like a real time capsule of everything that worked in that era. Like, it was criticised for what it did at the time, but now, looking back, I think it's a really good example of what made noughties horror so good.
Kat, wait, anything on that, or just feelings in general? Immediate feelings, I should say.
Yes. So I watched it. This was when the era I was working at Blockbuster, so I just rented everything because they were free. And yeah, there was as Becky was saying, there was a lot of these similar, inspired by true events, sort of possession, ghost story, haunted house things coming out. I think this is around about the same time as the Amityville remake. So there was a lot of this happening. So it did get lost in the water. I mean, I've revisited it a few times, and I think Kyle's performance is great. Virginia Madsen, who plays his mother, is equally great. I know that this was his first lead role in a film, and she was aware of this and she wanted to help him. So she literally picked him up from the airport and was like, right, I'm your mother now. So like the entire time that they were on set, she was essentially like his mother on and off set. I mean, he was 23 at the time. He didn't need a mother. But, she was very much there to help him through that. I think he just gives a really good performance before we get to the spooky stuff of just living with leukemia and they're going through all the treatment. He's in pain after all of the treatments, which I think he conveys really well. I mean, that's potentially drawing on some of his own experience. I mean, when he was 4 years old, he had open heart surgery. So when he was younger, he would have at some point have been going in and out of hospital. So I'm guessing he drew from that. So yeah, I think it was as a first lead performance, whilst the script might be a bit wobbly, I think, his performance kind of speaks for itself.
Not to reduce anything you just said there, but the one theme that is consistent for all of these films is he vomits in all of them. He's fine with that, apparently. But the thing that struck me about this is probably a movie out of its time, really, because it wasn't made at the right time. It was the right movie, wrong time, if that makes sense. Because the emotional undercurrent is very, very strong. There's a version of this movie which would just ruin people's week, absolutely. But it was made in an era where it was quite bang was kind of what the studios were going for. There was good examples within that, of course, but this doesn't really feel like that is what it's intending, really, because it has an awful lot of mythology going underneath the hood and an awful lot of sort of emotional ideas invested in it. Like the whole idea of when people are close to death, they see an awful lot more, which I found quite compelling, really. But yeah. What were your feelings on sort of the undercurrent, really? I mean, I've heard reviews where they said if this was done by Mike Flanagan, it'd be amazing, but because it's not, it's garbage, which it's harsh. But
I was literally just about to say that if this hit Netflix now and was directed by Mike Flanagan, it'd be like 5 stars across a lot of the publications, I think. Because I agree, like thematically, it's got a lot going for it, and I feel like it really was overlooked. And the fact that it was panned for sort of the tropes in it, as well as like obviously it being sort of based on a true story, and then the family involved in it came out and slated it as well. It just really didn't get off to a great start. So anything that it did have going for it, I feel like was always sort of going to be completely railroaded by all the controversy that surrounded it as well. But I feel like if this was remade or something now or rebooted, it would definitely do a lot better.
Try to get too much in too short a space as well. It's 90 minutes? It's an awful lot of story for 90 minutes that's going on there, which doesn't really do a great deal of service. And I also heard that it was a PG-13 in America? Have I got that right?
Probably, yeah. So it was, probably. So it was a bit of 15 over here. So yeah, PG-13 for them.
It's a very strong PG-13, especially with what happens in the third acts and all of the corpses. It's very, very strong, what it is. Yeah. So what were your feelings on sort of the emotional core of it, sort of, Kath?
I mean, it's obviously definitely there. I feel like if it was a mini-series, then that would perhaps work better because there would be more time for this. I feel like there's maybe too many members of the family. It's kind of hard to know where to focus on. Obviously, there's like the cousin who's living with them, who's looking after the younger siblings and stuff. I don't necessarily think we need all of them. You take those out and then you can focus more in on that. I mean, the whole bond between mother and son, I think, is played really well. And then there's obviously like the strain on the marriage with the alcoholic. There's a lot of themes, and this is a PG-13, and you've got kids, faced with childhood illness, alcoholic parents. Like this, I mean, this would have reflected some kids' lives, but that's brutal.
It really was. But kind of fearless at the same time, because I kind of watched all of them and they all kind of melded to one. But this, it's taken some swings, because I couldn't tell you any plot beats from any of the others from that era. all I can really remember is the clapping from The Conjuring and a few other sort of jump scares. But as far as sort of character moments, having a main character who is a teenager with cancer is pretty ballsy for any sort of era of horror, really. Especially one which is talked about as being so sanitized, like the noughties and the teens. Hang on, noughties or teens? When did this come out? 2009. So again, the noughties. Any feelings on what I just said? Don't wait on ceremony.
Yeah. Well, I'm just thinking. I'm just thinking like the noughties was like Hostel and Saw and stuff. So I think it's kind of just at the start of when they started to sanitize it, maybe, because I'm sort of thinking back and like Saw was what 2004, and that's not sanitized.
Yeah, I feel like when this was released, 2009, going into like the 2010s, it's sort of ushering in that more sort of, I don't know how to word it, that sort of like dramatic horror like we get with like The Witch and Hereditary and Midsummer and everything that came afterwards, that sort of, you know, elevated horror, if you will, that's been a lot more popular since. But I feel like this was slightly ahead of its time, like you say. It's ushering in that sort of feelings, but it was in a time that, like Kat says, we had Hostel, we had Saw, we had Wrong Turn, we had all of those really gory, like torture porn films that people were still enjoying at that point and still wanted that, and this didn't quite give you that, but then audiences weren't quite into what it was doing.
Yeah, the true story thing as well, that's always a horrible problem for any horror movie to have, because it can't possibly be, really, can it? It's always taken huge creative swings, and then it'll upset, like you mentioned earlier, Becky, it'll upset the family that it's about. So it's a struggle, really. Don't make them anymore, I don't believe, based on true story. Unless I'm
Oh, we still have the Ed and Lorraine Warren ones, like the Conjuring franchise. They're mostly based on like Ed and Lorraine Warren ones, and this is another one. It was something that Ed and Lorraine Warren investigated, but it was criticised at the time by, I can't remember a guy's name, but it was another like psychic at the time, criticised them when they first investigated it, saying they are making this up. So for people to then make a film years later based on what the Warrens said and then take further creative like liberties with it, it was so far from what the family had said actually happened to them. It's quite worrying when the families are still alive. Like, this is their lives reflected back on screen, and people, they are going to watch it. And especially with the true crime boom like that we've had in the years since, they're going to watch it and think, oh yeah, real life, this is really interesting, it's very dramatic. They're not necessarily going to think of how far removed from the truth it is. I mean, obviously you watch The Haunting in Connecticut and don't think this is 100% exactly what happened, but they might not realise quite how far from the truth it is.
But with the benefit of time removed, it does stand up as a particularly interesting example from that era, I think. It's not without its issues. I mean, of course it's not. It's just a bit light on its feet. If it was given more time, even if it was a mini-series, I think it'd have done that story an awful lot of good, really. But yeah, it stands up well with time, really, I think. There's not a lot to talk about with this one, really, is there?
Yeah, no, I really like this one. I think because this and Jennifer's Body came out in the same year, and I feel like both of them didn't find their audience at the time, but I like that years later they are still finding that audience and people that really like it, especially for Kyle's performance as well. I think it's interesting that that is what has stuck out with both films, more so with Haunting in Connecticut than Jennifer's Body. There's a lot more that I think speaks to people in that film otherwise, but I do think it's interesting that it's that performance that is talked about a lot with both films, like not too far off 20 years later. Well, 15 years later this year.
Yeah, it's a very bold swing for a first. You know what I mean? It's his first sort of lead role in a movie. You don't really get that sort of horrible role to embody, really. It's very intense, I imagine. I can't imagine what sort of effect that had on Planet. Anything else, Kat? Anything burning a hole in your pocket about The Haunting of Connecticut?
No, other than just like this was, like I say, was his first experience on set, so he kind of right from the get-go, he took the opportunity to learn as much about behind the camera as in front of the camera. I think Peter Cornwell, the director, was really gracious with his time and sort of explained things to him, because this was his first time. Yeah, he'd done some TV, but he wasn't a lead role in any of that TV, and it was guest star here and there or recurring character. But he had, Virginia Madsen helping him. He had the director, he had the crew and stuff, sort of showing him his performances back on the camera so that he could learn and tweak from there. So I just, think that, right from early on in his career, he's been very passionate about making sure that whatever he's in is to the absolute top of his ability. And I think it shows.
Yeah, he came out remarkably strong, really, for a first lead performance. You look at a lot of actors of generations past, and it feels like their beginnings in horror are not shameful so much, but they don't exactly celebrate them in the same way. Like, I think Mahogany, I was going to call him there, that's not right. Matthew McConaughey, he was in one of the Texas Chainsaw sequels, if I remember correctly. He's that entire generation of just kind of, it happened, don't talk to me about it ever again. But he should be proud of this one, frankly, because it's a very strong lead performance. Nothing.
So yes, we're both nodding, but yes, we can't hear nods.
No, you can't. But I think that's all you can really say about it, to be honest. The other two, there's much more points for conversation, I assure you. But that's The Haunting of Connecticut from 2009.
Forward, but I noticed that there wasn't any family prayer prior to the meal. Is that common?
Well, yeah, I guess.
Okay. Well, would you mind if I led us in a prayer? Just a simple one.
Oh, of course not. Thank you. We'd be honored.
Sure. Great. All right, everybody, grab hands. Grab hands. Okay.
Kevin?
Dear Lord, we thank you for this bountiful and nourishing meal on the table before us. May it strengthen and refresh our earth bodies so that we may follow your example for yet another day. Please bless Connie, who has prepared this feast with loving hands, as well as her life partner, Norman, who invites you into his heart and hopes to one day be called to Tanzania, where he can make a difference. And please bless Patty, whose kindness and hospitality has allowed me into this home where I can spread your wisdom amongst these souls. And please bless and watch over Kevin, who especially needs your guidance during his rebellious years, as he continues to lash out and alienate himself from those around him. Allow him to grow in grace and knowledge of you, and guide him in his search for his birth parents, who must one day hope to see his face, just as he longs to see theirs.
Wait, what?
In Jesus' name we pray.
Mom?
Amen.
I don't know what he did in the interim between 2009 and 2020. I think just lots of smaller roles that we've talked about quite a few. But in 2020, I guess you'd call it his breakout. His big breakout in an indie sense. But unfortunately, it happened during COVID, and that was 2020's Dinner in America. And I have to ask Kat what this one's about, because if I don't, I've probably done wrong. So, Kat, what is Dinner in America?
I mean, Dinner in America is tits. I think, I could just literally say that and stop.
Yes.
It's directed by Adam Raimier, who had previously done The Brown Bunny, which is a very different sort of film. But Dinner in America is sort of a black comedy, coming of age romance, which finds punk Simon intertwined with a loner Patty, and they're kind of both misfits, and they kind of come together, and he's really loud and abrasive and she's really timid and meek, and put them together, and that yin and yang sort of formed this really special relationship. And it's just a funny film. It's borderline offensive in places. The first 20 minutes, if you can get through the first 20 minutes, you will love this film. But the general feedback from test screenings and stuff is that those first 20 minutes are a little harsh, because Simon is such a bastard. There's no way around it. He literally goes to somebody's house with a girl, gets off with her mum, and then sets fire to the place. That's
Yeah,
not an adjusted person.
it's not
Um,
just this moment, isn't it? Nancy Badil, I don't know her name, from Die Hard, isn't it?
no, it's Leah Thompson from Back to the Future.
Oh yeah, same generation, but it's just an icon of a years past, really, which is always weird looking back at it.
Yeah, it's just a lovely film. I mean, it's starting like that. You're like, what? But it becomes this really lovely story of these two sort of misfits coming together, and it's got a hell of a song in it that they make during the film called the Watermelon Song, which is currently having a moment on TikTok. So yeah, it's a shame it released in 2020 when everything was shut down, but this is one of those films that really is the definition of cult because people keep finding it and it keeps growing. And the fact that now it's trending on TikTok and people are making art for it, and I think it's one of those films that will eventually sort of like find its place.
Becky, what are your feelings on Dinner in America?
Yeah, I mean, Kat put it perfectly. I mean, the only person that could, like, Kat is how I know of this film, posted about it, and I watched it afterwards, and it was just, from the first scenes, like you say, it's such an unusual film, but it's so funny, and it just sort of, as if you meet Simon in it, it sort of reels you in with that repulsiveness, but also that charisma that's underneath it. And then as it goes on and on and on, it really shows its heart. And by the end, I was like shedding a couple of tears over a couple that I've only known for like an hour and a half. It's such a lovely film. It's got all of those rom-com beats, but it's people that you wouldn't ever see in like a traditional Hollywood rom-com. And it's really nice to see the misfits have their moment, to see them find love, to see it be such really a healthy relationship in the end, despite all the chaos around it. They're very respectful of each other and their passions and what they want. And yeah, it's just so lovely with two fantastic central performances from Kyle and from Emily Skeggs as Patty as well. It's just wonderful.
Yeah, that is a weird way to think about it, really, isn't it? Because the rom com has become, well, for a while it was sort of poisoned chalice, really, wasn't it? For many years because of what the studios were doing. But when you break it down, this is perfectly a rom com. There's no other way you can describe what it is, and it's kind of brilliant, really, isn't it? When you think about it like that, how genres are being reclaimed by independent creators. I think that's quite cool, really. I think we have to talk about sort of. We've mentioned the fact that it's cruel, because in isolation that just doesn't sound like an awful lot. But as far as things that are happening, things that are said, the world that this takes place in is a horrible one, really, isn't it? We have Patty's parents, who one of them's I always forget his name. Oh, on the tip. Pat Healy, who's just, if you've got an indie movie, he'll be in it. It's just the way it is. But he's kind of a typical sort of suburban dad. The mum wants to try different things with the food. The brother's angry. Every time Patty goes anywhere, there's warnings for the hard R in this movie because it's said a lot. It's a hard movie, really, isn't it? But
Yeah.
is it a positive world, do you think, even though all of that happens in it? Or is it just a cartoon world? I don't know what I'm trying to ask here, but
I was gonna say, I think it's a horribly realistic world. I mean, whether people are quite as in your face as Patty's bullies are, because there's also some high. I mean, she's in her 20s, and there's some high school jocks who love to torment her at the bus stop, and they get like their friends and stuff to do it. And I mean, there are these pockets of teenagers who get off on, making fun of people and things. So I think it is an accurate reflection to a degree, and that's what Adam Raymer is doing, is he's shining a spotlight on this. And it's like those people that are feeling uncomfortable are the people that don't like being, confronted with this is what society's become. It's not this idyllic thing anymore where you know your neighbours and you're nice to your neighbours. It's this like horribly sort of mean place. And that Simon and Patty find each other is what makes this world a better place, when you find that person that you can sort of go to war with.
And the discrimination as well. She's not developmentally disabled in any way, but the way she's treated, I think that's the big hook that'll turn people off, really, isn't it? The things that people say to her, the way she's treated, the fact that a manager fires her because she says, I think you're a little bit slow, and that's it.
It is almost like cartoonish in how it plays across. Like, it's almost like, not in its visuals, but it also seems sort of like video game-ish, how it's just like, how the conversations develop in ways that it really doesn't feel like they're going to go in. And like Kat says, the unpredictability, while in the real world it's not maybe quite as amped up as it is in Dinner in America, we've only got a short amount of time in a film to tell this world and portray the real world. And I feel like how it does it by really exaggerating everything that everyone does, I think it's really interesting. Like, how they fall in love so quickly is very of the opposite end of the spectrum. People can be very hateful very quickly, but people love very fiercely and very passionately in it. And I also think it's quite an interesting sort of personification of the music that Simon plays as well. Obviously, he's in a punk band. Punk is very sort of like anti-establishment. It can be seen as quite hateful, but it's not. It's very sort of progressive and positive and always very forward thinking. And it feels like how people act like to extremes in the film is what he's like turning into art. And then we hear that as, like, as Kat says, the fantastic music that is in the film.
Yeah, that is, I mean, as a lifelong punk, thank you for saying that. But yeah, it's one of those things, isn't it? It's like the people that you see, executives at Disney who do all of this horrible stuff, but you see the makers of like the most disturbing horror movies be the absolute biggest sweethearts in the world, and that's the sort of the idea at the core of this, really. At least I think so. Anyway, with the Simon character, he's horrible, foul-mouthed, abusive person, but he cares so very, very much about everything he does. I think we see him at the beginning where he's getting some sort of like tests facility, isn't he? Where he's getting blood taken out of his body, and he's doing that for his band. He's not doing anything in his life by halves, really, which kind of makes it impossible not to fall in love with his character.
I love that. And Patty being revealed as a punk in it, being a fan of his band and punk music. I just love that, because to look at her, you wouldn't think, where's the studded leather jacket? Where's the mohawk? But I think it's really interesting to bring that in, don't judge a person by how they look. And it's such a simple message, but it's such an easy one to forget. I think it's such a nice, easy, simple premise in the film that works so well.
The only thing about the punk that I really am sort of disappointed that they don't do, I can't remember the name of the band that Simon hates with such a venom. The Alliance, is it called?
The Alliance, yeah.
You never see them. That feels like such a ripe moment for parody. That's the only thing that I think it really drops the ball on. Because, yeah, the hate there, that'd have been a good comedy moment, I think. Because doesn't he describe them as playing punk for eyeliner, kids in malls with eyeliner on, or 14-year-olds with eyeliner on, or something like that? That feels like a very thinly veiled jab. Yeah. The music then, beyond that, you talked about the Watermelon song. Have a moment on TikTok? I'll need a little bit more explaining about that, because that's a new one on me.
I think people have just found it, so they've started like doing their own covers of it and things. I mean, already, like from when the film was first released, if you went on YouTube and put in the Watermelon song, there would be videos of people covering it. But that's just now sort of filtered into TikTok, and so people are doing their own versions and they're editing videos to it and all of that sort of stuff. And I mean, the lyrics were written by Emily Skeggs. So although it was an independent film, this film had they had the time to spend time together before production, which never happens on an indie. Normally you turn up day one and you're filming. But they actually were able to spend 2 weeks together before the film started. And during those 2 weeks, I mean, I think Emily and Kyle even flew on a plane together, and Adam had worked it so that they had seats next to each other and they didn't know. So they like even flew over together and they could build that relationship right from there. And then much like the scene in the film where it's Patty and Simon are sort of working this song through together. That is what happened in real life, only it was Adam and Emily. So Adam was putting the beats down and everything, and Emily had been keeping a journal in character as Patty to help her access her, and she'd been writing poems, and she wrote the Watermelon song, and then they put it to music, and then that's the song that ended up being in the film. Which I think that's what's really special about this film as well, is that Emily and Kyle put so much of themselves into their characters. Kyle like grew up listening to punk music and was, very much into that sort of music scene growing up and that lifestyle. And so then he puts that into Simon, and then Emily's putting, her own poetry into the film. And that's what makes these characters people that, the audience want to spend time with.
And that speaks such huge things of the casting process, that as well, because I've seen many movies where whatever genre of music it might be, you get an actor who doesn't really know what that is, and it just kind of sinks the whole thing. It's one of those things, isn't it? Like, if you're into a type of music, it can identify your kind, and it just feels very, very genuine coming from Kyle in this, which is, for me, one of the big things that's sort of a sink or swim. I mean, I can't think of any other examples off the top of my head where they've just cast badly, but yeah.
Yeah, no, definitely. That's how it felt for me. Like, again, as like a punk fan, being into like punk, hardcore, emo, like growing up. There's just, it's like you say, you can sense your kind, you can sense the darkness in these people. And just like seeing Patty's bedroom and like even the covers on like the albums and everything, to the balaclava and how he is on stage, it really felt like you are watching a punk gig. This isn't just an actor, jumping about on stage. This is someone who has been at the front of punk gigs. And like with Kat saying them creating the song as well, it sounds like a real song. It doesn't sound like just a song on a soundtrack that has been made for the sake of a film. It feels like a real, I would love a full album. I'd like a tour if possible. I want to hear these songs because they're good. They've got love in them. They've got passion for that music. And like, just to have that as such a small tidbit in the film as well, in an entire film, it goes to show how much love for the art is in it.
Yeah, I take it back. There's two problems with this movie. One is there's not an official soundtrack or like LP for this, because they'd make a killing, especially with what Kat was saying with the Tik Tok thing. That would sell so much.
Nice little vinyl pressing.
Yeah. I mean, it's not an issue, obviously. It'll happen eventually. These things do come into happening. Because there's all those labels, isn't there, in America, who release like lovely pressings of like movie scores and soundtracks. So this does feel like it's in that company, in that conversation.
Yeah, 100%. And third problem, we need it in the cinema.
Yeah, that is the thing. Is it popular enough for a little run? I think it is, isn't it?
I would say so, yeah.
I mean, I don't think a full run, but I definitely think sort of bespoke screenings at like art house cinemas, like one night only. Maybe double bill it with Adam's follow-up Snack Shack, which is, if people haven't seen that, it doesn't star Kyle, but it's a lovely sort of like love letter to summer in the 90s in like middle America. It's very, very much in that world. In fact, talking to Adam, apparently Patty is in Snack Shack, because Snack Shack's set in the 90s and Dinner in America, though it never specifically says, we assume it's somewhere closer to our time. But yeah, there's a scene with like a baby, and apparently that baby in Adam's head at least is Patty. So they are kind of interconnected.
Well, that's nice that he's got sort of all these movies happening in universe. It's all one place. I like it when directors do that.
I think the other interesting thing about Dinner in America is that Kyle wasn't going to play Simon. So he got sent the script when he was working on a TV show called Outsiders. And he'd recently become a dad, and he was on a TV show and he was too busy. So he didn't even read the script. And then the film continued, because obviously films take years to make. The film continued, another actor was cast, and then that actor dropped out. then Kyle was in Hungary filming The Cleansing Hour with the director of photography, who would then go on to work on Dinner in America. And they said, "Oh, working on this film, but we've just lost the lead." And then Kyle was, "Oh, what's it about?" And then the guy started pitching him. He was like, "I think I remember something about that." And then he went into his emails, and he still had the original email where he was sent the script, and he read the script, and then that's how he got involved. He kind of got back in touch and was like, "Really sorry, I didn't read this ages ago, but yeah, I want to get involved in this."
What a stroke of luck.
Yeah, sometimes the universe just points you in the right direction sometimes. I'm not saying I believe in fate, but sometimes the universe gives you big signs and, you got to pay attention to them sometimes. And that was one for him. So about Kyle Gallner's performance then. We've touched around it and mentioned it in passing. I don't know whether you two can answer this, but why is it so charismatic, yet so hateful? Have you got an answer to that question? I'm not sure I can.
I think it's just
Oh.
good acting. I mean, I don't know that Kat has as well, obviously, but from interviewing him as well, he is very charismatic. It's a very easy person to speak to. Definitely not hateful, I didn't think, but I feel like a good actor
like when
and someone who loves
his
film,
anger, yeah.
They can sort of, people who love films and watch films, and especially I do think being like a music fan as well and channeling that sort of aggression in that music, I feel like it comes more naturally, I think. And again, I think some people are naturally just good at playing sort of that certain characters, I should say. Like this, for me, is on the first instances of him playing a character with a lot of facets going on. Like we say, he is very hateful. He does awful things. Then he's very quick to aggression. He very much thinks of himself, but then also doesn't. And he's very selfless and very loving towards Patty and very thoughtful. It's a lot of plates to spin. It's a lot of balls to juggle. It's a lot of lines to tread, and it's not the last time he does it. I feel like he very much does a lot of roles like this. And it's something that he just does well, and he's captivating while doing it. Whenever he's on screen, you can't really watch anything else.
Yeah, Kat.
If you want to see a hateful Kyle Gallner performance, The Cleanse or The Master Cleanse, it was originally released. He's a supporting character in that. It's got weird little creatures. It's got Johnny Galecki from The Big Bang Theory and Anna Frielin, and so they go away to a wellness center, and they have these like weird drinks, and out of them comes like, I guess, like your inner you, and it's like a glob creature, and they have to nurture that. They have to nurture their inner self. And Kyle plays like the abusive boyfriend of one of the other people in it, and he's just not a very nice guy. So that's a very hateful Kyle performance. He's also a baddie in Beautiful Creatures. So I think he kind of brings some of that to Simon, but I think he's just sort of channeling growing up in sort of the punk scene for that bit. But he is such a gentle soul. I mean, for somebody who kind of grew up in the industry, he's remarkably down to earth. I mean, he left LA to live in the woods. Anybody that's seen his Instagram feed, it's just him walking his dogs through the woods, surrounded by trees and lakes and things. He's a very chill guy. And I think that's what he kind of infuses into Simon. And for me, it's that whole, just the scene where they're making the music and Patty's singing, and then that tear just sort of goes down his cheek. I think that's the moment when I fell in love with the film. And that's probably the minute that I fell in love with Kyle as a performer. Because I had always watched stuff that he was in. And him being in Dinner in America was the only reason why I accepted the screener from the PR, because I was like, oh, he does good stuff. He's in Beautiful Creatures. I know everyone pans Beautiful Creatures, but I like it. And I was just blown away by him, being so vulnerable just in that scene alone.
Very sympathetic as well, because it's not like it suggests he's just an angry man with a heart of gold. It's the family background as well, which is probably the hardest scene in the whole thing, I think, when you get to meet his family and just how, I guess, intolerant they are. Would you say that's the hardest thing? Me, personally, I just find that, like, nails down a chalkboard, just really awkward. and just ugly,
Yeah,
despite the things that he does to other people. Yeah.
it was horrible. It sort of felt like it was the kid that was just never given a chance. He was never going to be anything else, like a proper product of his background sort of thing. It felt like whatever he does, he's always just going to be shit canned by his family. And yeah, I thought it was really horrible to watch when you've seen him try and do such nice things for Patty and they won't even give him a chance. I mean, I suppose we don't know 100% what's happened before the events of Dinner in America. There could be very valid reason they're not, but I don't know. I mean, especially as a parent too, thinking of how his parents are speaking to their child. I couldn't imagine being like that with my own kids. So it just felt so cold when we've seen such passion in the rest of the film.
Yeah, I think I think he's the middle child, isn't he? It's like that.
I think
He's
so,
the
yeah.
like the sister's the older one, and then his brother Danny, who turns up, I assume is sort of the younger one. So he's kind of that middle child that doesn't quite fit in because he's not his parents' favorite because he wasn't the first, and he's not his parents' favorites because he's not the youngest. So I think he's always kind of had to compete for their attention and their affection, and they clearly just don't understand the world that he's in. They assume that he's been shooting up when he's been making music. They are that family that take a look at Slipknot and go, "Oh yeah, they're all murderers because why else are they wearing masks?" They're that sort of family. So I don't necessarily think anything has gone on. I think he's just always been completely misunderstood by his family because they haven't taken the time to understand him as a person because they're too busy with the other kids.
Yeah, it's very valid. Doesn't make it any easier to watch though. Even on the second viewing, it's
No.
just
Yeah.
grueling. Honestly, it makes those first 20 minutes that people, which I saw a lot of reports at the time where people think it's too mean, it's too mean spirited. I thought, oh, watch horror movies, you'll see mean spirited. But beyond that, it's just, yeah, that was much harder. I think just that family dynamic, and just they're not willing to give him an inch. They just always assume the worst of him. It's horrible family situation. But is there anything either of you want to bring up about Dinner in America? Anything left to talk about regarding the movie? I mean, before you do, one thing I feel personally, it feels like it exists in John Waters' universe. I don't know if either of you are familiar with his work,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
it does feel like it's in his world where one of his movies is just happening the city over. It's a huge compliment because John Waters is great, but
Yeah, I can sort of see that. It has got that weird sort of almost campy behaviour from all the characters and like all the strange kooky things that do seem to happen between everyone. I don't know, I just love it. I remember feeling gutted when this ended that there wasn't like a second, third, fourth, however many films to watch afterwards because I'm normally happy if a film just ends and it's like contained, but I desperately need to know what happened to these characters. I need it in my bones.
Um, Adam does have a plan for a TV series, whether it would go ahead or not. He does have a story. When I interviewed him for Snack Chat, that was one of the questions I asked, obviously. And he said that there is an idea that he has. He does have a way to continue Patty and Simon. So I would just say, if you haven't watched Dinner in America, just buy it. Don't watch it and then buy it. Just buy it because you're going to want to keep it. And the more money, the more people talk about this, the more chance we've got of getting it back into cinemas of a continuation of the story. But yeah, I love it. The thing that it reminded me of was Bad Santa. Just the dynamic between Simon and Patty is very much like Willie and Thurman in the first Bad Santa because it's that he's so mean to that little kid, and that kid is just completely oblivious to the fact that Santa is being a dick to him and just does nothing but want to be his friend, like Patty is with Simon. But then there is that moment where Willie sees, who this kid is living with and what his life is, and then it changes him. And I know it's a very weird comparison, but I have a soft spot for Bad Santa, and it's just that the character dynamic between them. It's like Napoleon Dynamite meets Bad Santa with just a little bit of Heather's just thrown in there. It's the whole like getting back on the jocks feels like a very JD JD thing from
Yeah.
Heathers.
Yeah, not quite as extreme as Heathers. Nowhere near as extreme as Heathers, but yeah.
Well, I don't know. I mean, okay, they don't kill anybody, but they do set it up to make it look like they've been sleeping with a dead cat. That's,
Well, that's funny, I suppose. But
Don't want to get on your bad side, just in case.
yeah, but I think that's it for Dinner in America. I mean, it's universal. I mean, I liked it a lot first time, but second time I was like, yeah, this is amazing. I absolutely adore this thing. But I mean, I just watched it on a whim on Arrow Player. I had like a trial on that. I've heard about this, so yeah. And they're the greatest discoveries, I think. Where you just take a chance on something and it's like, where's this been all my life? Sort of moment.
That guy.
You bring him up again and I'll kill you. Things got back there. You were right to intervene. You learning, huh? Look, I told you I was doing this for you, and I meant it. So let's just forget about it. Forget about him. Everything's cool. Everything's cool, right? Randy?
Leading to the last movie, which a debate could be made that it's basically just Dinner in America again, but horrible. But Becky, is that what The Passenger is? 2023's The Passenger?
That's not what I wrote for my synopsis, but that is basically it. Released in 2023, The Passenger is horrible Dinner in America. It follows Randy, played by Johnny Birchtold, who's a fast food employee who's forced to sort of confront everything going wrong in his life and all of his fears after his co-worker goes on a violent rampage in the fast food place where they work and shoots their fellow co-workers and takes him on a road trip that he will not forget. Kyle plays that person. It is Benson. And as it goes on, similar to Dinner in America, we learn a lot about their home lives and how it's brought them together.
Kat, The Passenger. I seem to recall this is in your top 10 of the year because you did it on this podcast. So I guess you're a big fan of this one too.
Yeah. Yeah, I love it. And it was a lot of pressure for the films that came after Dinner in America because I love Dinner in America so much, and I was fortunate enough to be able to interview Kyle for the first time off of Dinner in America. And then I think before The Passenger release, I'd interviewed him a further 2 times, so we'd become quite friendly. So there was that pressure. I mean, he literally messaged me after he knew that I'd watched it to ask what my opinion was, and that's nerve-wracking when you've got like the lead of a film going, what did you think of my film? And thankfully I loved it. And you're right, there are a lot of comparisons to Dinner in America, particularly Benson and Simon. Benson and Simon are 2 sides of the same coin. It's just at some point along the road, one of them went one way and one of them went the other. Like, they're both very similar in that they quite open to letting the world know exactly what they think of them. They're quite abrasive, but whereas Simon never closed off his heart, Benson did, which is quite tragic. And I always say that the reason that Benson has his fluffy cardigan is because he's using it to comfort himself because the world never has. So yeah, I loved it. And as much as I know that Benson is supposed to be sort of like the bad guy, I was very drawn to that character and the complexities of it and the performance that Kyle gives with that character that, by the end, I was kind of Team Benson, which, I don't know what it says about me.
Well, no, I mean, I think it does make it doesn't totally vilify him, I don't think. It does present him as a human who actually has emotions, and he's not just this rampaging person who's going on a murder spree. Because he gets numbers. He's quite a violent guy, but he's trying to make the world a better place in his own way. I think that's the core of his arc, really, isn't it? And you get these little glimmers that he's kind of gave up on making himself better when he sees that principal, vice principal at a school. So he's not all bad. So I don't think it says anything, really, that you quite sympathise with him. It's quite a shocking movie, really, isn't it? In the same way that Dinner in America is, its opening scene is very intense, I think. That's another, I can't remember any sort of reports of the same sort of thing, but it's another scene where if you don't like that first scene, you will bounce off this movie quite hard. Because it is very, very ugly.
Yeah, 100%. And I feel like when I watched The Passenger, I watched Dinner in America again not long before it. And obviously the opening scene in that is like very harsh, but the rest of the film, it has its harsh moments, but it is so lovely. So when I went into The Passenger and it had the same sort of vibe at the start, I definitely wasn't prepared for how nasty it got so quickly and the turns that it takes. I mean, like a road trip and the wines in the road, The Passenger, it really takes you through it. There's a lot of things that happen that like I really didn't see coming the first time round. And I mean, even the second, knowing what happened, it's easy that so much goes on that you can see so much more again. And it is like you say, if you're not into the first scene, I think the rest of the film's going to be a lot.
What set him off? I can't recall. It's because the bullying. Getting bad with names now. It's Benson and what was the other one called? Randy. Benson and Randy. They're just horribly bullying him, and they're making him eat a day-old burger, and he just flips, doesn't he? Was that it? Was that the moment? Or have I missed something there?
Yeah, it's that Benson's kind of been watching Randy, and I think that the other aspect of Benson is that he sees Randy as very much a younger him, and with there was nobody to look out for him when he was that age, he's kind of taken on that role for him because he knows that he's gone too far to change who he is, but he sees hope within Randy, and when he sees him just blindly doing what this bully wants, it's just that straw because he's obviously been working and he's been seeing this bullying behavior for so long, and he's just desperate for Randy to stick up for himself because that's kind of what the whole film's about. It's about Benson teaching Randy to stand up for himself, and that he doesn't do it in that burger scene is just the step too far. And I mean, they're pretty irritating co-workers, to be fair. I mean, sod Randy, that'd probably be enough for me as well, like, come on, guys, I'm sweeping here and you're just sticking around. Like, I get it.
The question there, though, is he has the gun in his boot all along. Was he planning to do this? Or has he been waiting a while and just waiting for that? Okay, fair enough.
America.
It's gone to the supermarket, mate. It's just the daily job.
Well,
it's sort of that unpredictability of him, isn't it? It's sort of, it feels to me like he's always prepared for whatever might happen. So there could be all sorts in that car.
Yes. But he just goes off on this road trip with a fantastic selection of t-shirts. I know that's not the takeaway from this, but it's a nice takeaway, if you...
We all want we all want the cardigan, so t-shirts, throw them in the mix as well.
But even at the... I can't talk about the end. Even despite everything that happened, I don't think Randy ever hates Benson. There's never that sort of antagonistic relationship, which I think is what helps it as well. It's never a hostage situation. I dare say they actually become friends at one point. I'm misinterpreting, do you think?
No, I would say so. To me, it feels very sort of brotherly or almost like father-son in some form of like warped way, because it is like he's raising him from like, the timid person he is at the start of the film to the person he does eventually become, that is a lot more like self-assured, has the things that he wants. It is sort of almost like that sort of mentor and mentee relationship in, not that Randy asked for it or even wanted it at the start, but it is strange how it plays out. It's definitely, it doesn't have a feeling of criminality, even though obviously it is, he has abducted him from work and murdered people.
Yeah. I don't think Randy is capable of hate. I think he's such a gentle soul, and that is why he's found himself in the position that he's in. He's quite happy to let people take control and steer his life around him. So I don't think he has the capacity to hate Benson.
Which I think saves this movie, really, because I imagine it was accused of all sorts of nihilism upon its release. Which was it? I'm not sure, because this one kind of went under the surface as far as that initial reception.
Maybe it was just me and like the reviews that I read, but I think it was a lot of people that enjoyed like Dinner in America that then reviewed this, and to me it really seemed to get really positive reviews from people, especially because of like Johnny Birchtold and Kyle Gallner, their performances and how they sort of maintain the tension in it. The fact that, I mean, most of the film takes place in a car and small sets. They've got very limited space and they do so much with it. Most of the reviews I read were very, very complimentary of it, despite the fact that, the themes in it very much could be criticised for like how bleak it is in parts.
I think my issue was that it was marketed as a horror film, and I don't think it's a horror film.
No.
It's a road movie, it's a drama, it's potentially a thriller, but it's not a horror. So I know that when the first trailer came out, it went hard, and all the articles were like new horror. And of course, Kyle's done quite a bit of horror. It's like, oh, our Scream King's back in this, and it's like it's not a horror, and it's kind of this label that's followed Kyle quite a lot, especially recently, I guess, from the double hitter of Scream and Smile, just to describe anything that he's in, whether it's horror or not. And I think that's what frustrated me with this. So then people went to this film thinking it was a horror. They saw that opening shooting scene, which, given it's set in America and, the climate and everything with guns in America was quite confronting. I know that Johnny and Kyle both struggled to watch that scene back, and just being on set during that scene, just, knowing the stories that are going around them. So I know that that was quite an issue for people, but then horror fans are going there, seeing that and going, oh, okay, so it's going to be like Bonnie and Clyde. They're going to be like shooting their way across America. And then actually it becomes this like really touching like bromance. And I think that then turned some people off. So I don't think it was necessarily the bleakness of it. I think it was that whole thing of, expectations and hypes being in the wrong direction, which is something that obviously marketing loves doing at the moment.
Yeah, they absolutely do. Like Abigail from this year, that was a big one for me. If they just believed in that, maybe. But they gave away the twist. Completely gave away the twist. But yeah, this is a interesting movie, I think. A little bit lost in the mix. I think, honestly, it feels like it could be an extension. It almost feels like that could be Simon a bit older. That has that sort of, it has that same, his character, Benson has that same sort of aggressive charisma about him. Although it's a little bit more off the, he's had a bit of a bad time after coming out of prison, maybe. And this is who he is. Yeah. But there's a common thread between that sort of charismatic, angry guy, I think.
Yeah, this is the version of Simon who didn't meet Patty. This is, the version of Simon that got immediately arrested after setting their house fire, and then, missed out on the opportunity to meet him. I think it's kind of like that sliding doors moment. You could argue that Patty is the thing that saved Simon from becoming Benson.
Maybe. And also just the return to Dinner in America, his haircut is great. And the first scene with the guy saying, "What's up with your hair?" And he has the worst hair in the world, the American football guy. They just can't not mention that. Can't not mention it. It's funny how trends come along with haircut, isn't it? Because that is like a super stylish haircut now. But
Yeah, I think he's a fashion icon in both. Like we said, that cardigan, love it.
yeah, it takes confidence to wear that.
It does, and it works.
Yeah.
It works so well for his character.
I remember wearing pink shoes once, going to the bakery, and somebody shouted at me from in a car, and I thought, "What did they say?" But they sort of sped off, laughing like they dropped a zinger, and I thought, some people are weird, really. But yeah, it takes confidence to wear that, and it's just like a normal jumper to him. It's that charisma, I think, is very important with actors because it helps people stand out. I think it's how you become fans of actors, and this current generation is an awful lot of angry young actors who are burning bridges. I feel, especially when it's not related to Disney, but in the Disneyverse, it's happening all the time. How actors are just basically burning the world, and then you think, hang on, you do realise you want people to watch these movies, right? You're not really going the right way about it. But yeah, charisma matters, I think, is what I'm basically getting around to saying. And in all three, he has it in spades.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it speaks to how he sort of interacts with fans and people who like his film as well. Like, he's very sort of interactive on social media, as well as talking a lot about the projects he does. It does give that sort of bridge between the people who are also passionate about these projects as well. It feels very much like the fan base is involved with that project too, which I think is very interesting when we live in a world now where a lot of celebrities are coming off social media, especially because of the reaction they have from fans, and fans that sort of overstep lines and boundaries, and they don't have that privacy and space. I do think it's interesting that there's, someone like Kyle who's very interactive about like his projects and his work with people who are also passionate about them as well. It's sort of a very interesting relationship with the fans of these films, and I do think it's definitely one of the reasons I think that these films do so well. It's that people watch them because of that sort of social media personality that this person has.
Yeah, I agree. I think it is that there's loads of celebrities, who are on Instagram and they'll push their project for like a week and then it's on to the next thing. And, it's all very, get ready with me and all those sorts of videos. But, Kyle's content is, him begging people to support this film that, him and the cast and crew put their blood, sweat and tears into. Please support it, juxtaposed with him doing DIY around his house or him walking in the woods. It's very wholesome content. It's not one of those celebrities that's screaming like, look at me, like me, subscribe. He never does any of that spiel. It's just like, please, if you can, tell your friend about this film, go and see this film. And I think that endears him because he's just a normal person. He's not got that facade of celebrity that he's hiding behind. He's just being genuine, and people can pick up on that. And you want to then support him because he just seems so lovely.
It comes back to what Kat said as well at the very start. I will watch anything that Kyle's in because I feel like he picks things because he's passionate about it, because he's passionate about everything he then promotes. He's not going to promote. I mean, yeah, you would promote something, I suppose, that you're not that interested in because it is your career, but I never get that impression from how he speaks about the projects he does and from how he promotes them. It does make me trust his judgment. When I've watched it and enjoyed it, I'm going to enjoy the next one. Because if I've enjoyed this one he's picked, I trust his taste, and I trust that when he believes in something, it's going to be good. And so far, I've not been proved wrong. Like, since Dinner in America, everything since, it's, banger after banger.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that he's so proud of what he does as well, that just speaks volumes of
so nice.
Of a real guy he is, which, yeah. So it's come to the part of the show. I mean, we mentioned 3 movies. We can't do everything he's done because that would be a ridiculous podcast, and I don't want any part of it. So I guess now is the part of the show, just any other movies, maybe not in the same sort of extent or length as we've done these 3, but any other movies from his filmography that you just want to highlight and draw attention to in a non-spoiler fashion. I think is the point I have to stress there, because he does it. we've timed this release quite knowingly because this episode's released between two movies he's done this year. One being Strange Darling and the next one being, Smile 2. So, yes, any other movies that you want to highlight, either of you? We haven't talked about at all.
Smile's great. That was a real sort of breakout again. I don't think anyone expected the success of that film. Again, down to the marketing, but also the passion of the cast as well. It's great. It's creepy. The whole success of it has led to a second one. It's awesome. Another one I loved that was just before The Passenger, I think, was Mother May I. Another sort of like erotic thriller that he did that I loved. So many twists and turns. The central performances again are so like these complex characters that you don't know, who's the good guy, who's the bad guy, and I was just gripped from start to finish.
Has that been released over here? Because it was on the festival circuit, but it's another one that's just sort of vanished.
Where is it to stream? I think it's on streaming now.
I think it's on Freevee. It was on Freevee.
Because I remember getting the reviews in, but after that I've just not heard anything about it really. Just sort of vanished about.
It was another sort of like 2020 to 2024 sort of weird mid-COVID sort of thing. Everything sort of got lost, I feel, in that period, but it was such a good film.
The one I was sort of hinting with the no spoiler bit was Strange Darling, because that was potentially going to be on this episode, but I haven't seen it yet.
Fights.
Yeah, I have not seen it yet, but that's been championed very vocally by a lot of people. Many calling it one of the best of the year so far. So, can you talk about it without spoiling the hell out of it? I'm not sure.
It's just great. I mean, without going into the plot at all, if you like Kyle Gallner and complex characters, you'll like Strange Darling. Visually, it's beautiful as well. That's what I really, really liked about it. Aside from the story, it looks so good.
Giovanni Ribisi did that as well. That's just one of those pinch me moments, really, isn't it?
So surprised by that.
Yeah, Phoebe's brother from Friends has made his. I mean, he's been making music videos and stuff for years, but this is his first feature as DOP with JT Morning directing. I went to see it. Day of recording this, I went to the cinema to see it for what is now my fifth time of seeing this film. It's beautiful. It's complex. There's so many layers to it. The soundtrack from Zeeberg is amazing. She made it bespoke for this film with JT, and Willa Fitzgerald is incredible in it. There's some supporting cast who are equally great. It's got the grossest breakfast you'll ever see.
Okay.
And yeah, it's
watching that
every time I've seen it.
Breakfast.
But yeah, Strange Darling is great. It's coming. I think it's coming to digital. No, it's out on digital now because Andy Connor, my podcast co-host, he watched it last night, and it's coming to physical media on the 2nd of December. So get it on those Christmas lists.
Not a lot of things.
Getting it.
Sorry, go on, Kath.
It's getting a UHD as well. It's getting UHD, so it's getting the full snazzy, beautiful treatment. So
that's good, because a lot of indie darlings, festival darlings, don't really get that home video treatment. Because I'm not sure whether Passenger has. I looked for that physically, but nothing for that.
Digital.
Yeah. So 2 questions. I mean, this is a horrible question to ask, but assuming he retired tomorrow, he's not going to. He's got an absolutely wonderful career ahead of him. What would his legacy be if he did decide that?
Ooh, I mean, it probably would on the surface be, Kyle Gallner's Scream King, wouldn't it? I mean, there was a big article, I can't remember where it was. I think it's Dread Central that did it about why he is the Scream King at the moment. And I do definitely think that would be his legacy. It should be, in my opinion, for, like we've said, a lot of his indie roles. He's really done so much for indie cinema in the mainstream in the past few years. That is what I would like to see celebrated more, because a lot of the titles he's done I feel like his performance is really what brought the popularity to them.
Yeah, I would agree. I would also just going back to previously, a couple of films which are both indie. Welcome to Happiness is a film that he produced, which has got a really eclectic cast. It's a very kooky thing. It's like there's a cupboard in this guy's room and it takes them somewhere else. It's weird. And then Band of Robbers, which is very in keeping with Dinner in America to a degree. It's like these two. It's based on Mark Twain's story, and it's like Huck and Finn if they grew up, and then it's kind of like a small town America, like crime thriller comedy, with what's his name, Goobler, the guy from the crime show, Matt Goobler. Is it Matt? Is it? He's in 68 Kill. That guy.
Yes.
They've got great chemistry. But in terms of his legacy, it unfortunately would be for his horror work, which I think is a shame because, as Becky said, his work in the indie sphere is much more exciting. It's not to discredit the work he's done in horror, but it's these indie films and getting these projects off the ground where his heart lies, and that should be his legacy. I mean, maybe now we're seeing a turning point with Dinner in America sort of like taking over social media. So, for me, his legacy would be Dinner in America and what's come after. But I think for Gen Pop, it would be, he fought Freddy, he fought Ghostface. It would be that.
In Scream, is he in the scene with the ladder? Because I can't quite place him in that movie. The ladder between flats.
Scream, no, that's Scream 2, Scream 6. Scream, he's like the jealous ex-boyfriend of one of the teenagers, and he's something with his car. Like he's out with his car, but he wasn't supposed to be in Scream. He auditioned for Scream. He auditioned for Jack Quaid's character. He didn't get it, but the Radio Silence guys really vibed with him and literally phoned him up and said, "Hey, do you want to come and get killed by Ghostface?" So he turned up. They wrote the character of Vince for him. He turned up because it was during COVID. He did a lot of filming during COVID. Because it was COVID, he got locked down on set with everybody. So although he was only there for a couple of days, he got to stay on set. David Arquette took him for like an eye appointment, and he did painting. David Arquette is like a Bob Ross approved, like trained artist or something. So David Arquette was like doing painting sessions with the cast and stuff. So yeah, he just got to like turn up, get killed by Ghostface, and then just chill out for a couple of weeks, hanging out with some really fun people.
Wholesome time.
I can't say fairer than that. Here's a weird question to end on. Does he need Hollywood?
No, I wouldn't say so. I mean, everyone would I'd love to see every actor that I love on that sort of level of like, Hollywood Walk of Fame, sort of any project they could pick. But no, I like him in these indie roles. I really do. I mean, like Kat says, I love like the big horror roles he does. But even as like someone who works in the horror sphere, his indie films outside of those are my favourites. And I don't want him to leave that sort of. I always want him, I want him to go for that success, of course, but could just keep him a little longer in the indie films to do these interesting, strange projects so we get more of these weird and wonderful films. I'd much prefer that.
Kat?
Yeah. I don't think he needs Hollywood. I know that were he ever to be asked, he would happily play the Green Lantern. That's primarily he can already shoot a crossbow. He's already played a superhero. He played the Flash in Smallville. But I know he'd be keen to do Green Lantern. But I think he's kind of already done the Hollywood thing. Jennifer's Body wasn't a massive release, but it did have Megan Fox and Amanda Seyfried in, who were both, big off of Mean Girls and Transformers. So that was very much in the focus. The Nightmare on Elm Street remake, again, was very, Hollywood driven. The Beautiful Creatures film, he's kind of he tried Hollywood when he was younger, and I don't think he meshed with that mentality. And he lived in LA for a number of years, and then he wanted to go and live in the woods. I just don't think he vibes with Hollywood. So I don't think, maybe every now and again just popping up, but yeah, I don't think he needs Hollywood. Not when he's done this very grassroots thing. He's got his core audience now who will just watch whatever he's in.
I feel like it could be very restrictive as well. Like, his most interesting roles have been these more complex, meaty indie roles, and like, not that we don't get things like that in Hollywood, but I don't feel like they're the same to the same degree, and I don't feel like it'd be as big a push or a challenge for him, because again, from like an interview I did with him after The Passenger came out, he likes that challenge and to do something that pushes what he knows of acting and to learn something new. And I feel like he's not necessarily going to get that from like the big Hollywood blockbusters. So it feels like it'd be sort of a waste of talent almost.
Yeah, I mean, with some actors, it feels inevitable that they're going to be, I don't know, in the next Marvel movie. That's just a matter of time for him. But he doesn't have that same feeling, is what I was fundamentally getting at. He has that independent spirit about him, which is not that common. It really is not that common. So I think that's it, really, for the first episode of Season 4 on Kyle Gallner. There we go. Got it in. Gallner. Hang on. It had to happen once, didn't it? Did it?
I did it at the start.
Sorry. Had to happen. But, yeah, I think that wraps us up for this episode.
With one more thing. Okay. In terms of like what he's doing next, he's just finished shooting Caroline with Samara Weaving, which is directed by Dinner in America's Adam Ramier. So that is definitely something that people should be keeping their eyes on. Plus, I know we've covered Samara Weaving on the podcast before. We all love Dinner in America. Putting them with Kyle, I think that's going to be that's the film that could sort of tip all of them over.
Yeah. She has that feeling to her as well, that sort of indie spirit to her as well. So yeah, wrapping up, Becci, where can we find you online and the things you do?
Yeah, so you can find me over on Twitter at BL Says Writes. You can find the things I write regularly over at Metro UK, Digital Spy, and Fangoria. There's pretty much always new stuff coming up there. So yeah, come and read what I write about.
And Kath?
Yep, so I am at Gizmo Shikari on Twitter, Instagram, Letterboxd. There's links to all of my work there. You can also listen to my chaotic podcast with Aurora at Movies with Mummy on a variety of podcast platforms. And obviously, I've recently started a new venture for The Geek Show with Andy Connor. We Are All Lost, which is a Lost rewatch podcast. We're still early episodes, but already we're mightily confused. So please do watch and listen along with us.
Yes, and if you want to get in touch with the show in any way, please do email us at directorsuncutpod@gmail.com. And you can find me on social media, even though I'm really bad at posting on it, at Uncut Robcast across all of the main ones. So until next time, which I think will be a Halloween special, the first time I've ever done that. So let's see where that goes. That should be interesting. But until then, thank you very, very much for listening.